Well, let's kick this off. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this session. I'm Tobias Rydberg, working at Fluva, and next to me I have my dear friend and colleague Dmitriy. I think that you all can see his hologram here. He's a little bit taller than me. I would say a little bit bigger as well. But no, he's running late from another session, but he will like come running in here as soon as he can. So the topic of this session is like bring availability zones up to par, or I would say kind of like bring availability zone into a core concept of OpenStack and like part of that design, so to say. We built quite recently a cloud with 3 availability zone that actually stretches like 3 physical data centers. So kind of mimicking a little bit of like how Azure is doing it, how AWS is like setting this up like architectural wise. We ran into some issues, and the customers are like facing a little bit of like issues utilizing the cloud capabilities with these availability zones set up as well. Like when it comes to the usability, it's not possible to for example, like place a couple of servers into a server group with anti-affinity over availability zone, and that actually trickles down into the various other projects as well. Like how do you do that with Octavia to have like a multi-site setup like with Octavia? If you don't have the support for having like anti-affinity group of availability zones, and that becomes like a slight problem for each and every project underneath, well, that utilizes like, for example, the Nova scheduling capabilities. Oh shit. So there are a couple of use cases at this page. You have the link at the top, and this is just like an introduction to the discussion here. And as I said, like cross availability zone scheduling would have been like super neat to have from a use case perspective. There is also like migration of block storage devices in between availability zones, because I wouldn't say most probably, but at least for some use cases, you don't want to have like a stretched storage cluster in between availability zones because of whatever can happen in a case where the storage cluster gets a hiccup. So you probably would like to have a separate storage cluster in each availability zone for continuity reasons and all of those things, and resilience for that matter.
That's well. Just to be clear, at least for Nova, we don't guarantee that there are failure domains. In terms of, you can do whatever you want with availability zones. If you really want just to use availability zones as a way to say to an end user, those are just aggregates because you're not able like to know those aggregates because you are the end user, that's just one way of scheduling some host. Like for example, I can understand that for public clouds that they want to have availability zones, because for sure that's kind of an SLA that they say to their users that if they set the instance to that AZ, then yes indeed, that will be a failure domain. But there are other use cases where people use AZs not with that kind of SLA. So that's where I'm a bit torn of putting into stone the fact that AZs should represent something where basically the resources are set cornerstone as failure domains. I just wanted to make sure that we will agree on that one.
Well, we can agree that Nova doesn't have that concept as of today, at least. Yeah, that's for sure, and that is kind of why I bring this up. Kind of like, is that something that we could potentially implement in Nova, for example? or do we have to rely on host aggregates for that, or is it possible to actually do an anti-affinity over host aggregates?
I mean, I don't want to rush into solutions. I'm just saying that what you're asking means that I think the AZ concept can be changed. That's what I'm sure about that. I mean, if we really want to have a way to group a set of resources in the, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. The problem is that ability zones, as far as I know in Nova, are just host aggregates. Here, what you are saying is that you would like to get a group of providers of resources, not talking placement, trying out to not talk placement. But yeah, that's what I'm seeing here. You are asking for, you know, placement resource providers, right? The placement API and the placement resource providers objects. That's what you are asking for. You are asking to say that that's the problem that we have with Nova. Nova ability zones are just a set of hosts, and you're asking for more than just hosts. That's what you're asking, right?
Yeah.
I'm just saying that we have aggregates, we have placement aggregates that gives you a way to group a set of resource providers, which are not necessarily compute nodes. That's just what I'm saying.
Is it worth raising, so I just wanted to pare down back to your problems that you had, Tim, because I think they're interesting. By interesting, I mean, I've had similar problems. To be explicit, that's why they're interesting to me particularly. So you want affinity to be more than just host affinity, right?
Yes.
That's basically what you're saying here.
Another level of that.
Yeah.
Like,
So one of my uses of AZ, which is awful, is I often end up using AZs for racks because I have a hammer that looks like an AZ. In my particular use case, which is more HPC, you know, people get assigned a rack, and therefore, well, I should say a switch affinity is probably what I'm trying to do, which is often has been historically a rack. So we have spoken in the past, right, about relaxing the term AZ. So it's more like, you could almost call it failure domain in your case, which I think would be cool, right? You could say failure domain A, B, C. But we need to extend the server group affinity to be able to do some arbitrary grouping. We had a conversation about this in the past. It was with J pipes, so that dates it. We got all very confused and in a twist about multiple levels of distance. If we ignore all of that, I think it's a much simpler question.
Yeah.
So if the group is called foo, and you're foo1, and there's a foo2, foo3, and you want to be affinity or anti-affinity based on foo, I think that's a great spec. I think that's what you're trying to say.
That's what I'm saying is that we have all the concepts already in the placement API. The problem is that we don't model all the resources within placement. You mentioned, for example, the switches. I don't think we.
I mean, so for the switches, I was completely like cheating. It's just that I would have switch A, switch B, switch C as host aggregates, and then the hypervisors and ironic nodes would be, well, that's a different question, let's not go there. The hypervisors and ironic nodes would go in the right placement aggregates and the right thing would happen.
Well, I very briefly looked at the current proposals that were mentioned. I assume most of the problems are about the technical details that in order to know whether I should, because if we talk about anti-affinity we need to make sure that when you send an instance, we don't race into getting like two instances from the same anti-affinity group into the same host. So in order to prevent that race, we have this kind of late anti-affinity check that runs on the compute. And most of the issues that we're having with the proposals were about the fact that if we really want to have this kind of SLA, we need this kind of opcode, which is a bit sad. So that's why if we
Cache
go
them.
down that route, then we need to make sure about maybe a soft affinity
Yeah,
would be better than a hard affinity.
definitely, I would say, because that is the failure domain concept comes into play there as well. Because what we would like to protect the customer's workload from is that it should be okay if one data center vanishes from the planet, and then you potentially would like to have your 3-node database cluster up and running, and then a soft anti-affinity comes into play.
Oh, so you do want soft.
Yeah, I would say so.
I think there is no way, well, no reason to do hard affinity on AZs, to be honest, because if you like spawn like more, so if you for instance have 3 availability zones and you spawn like 5 instances, you are set to fail pretty much.
Yeah, agreed.
And it's better like to do soft and do like 2 instances in one AZ, 2 instances in 2, and like 1 in third one.
The trouble with the soft affinities is that they turn out to be weighers, right?
Correct.
And the weighers are basically random if you're not careful because of the way it works.
Well, that depends on how you set them, but yeah, if you basically set the wrong numbers, then
It's really hard to set the right numbers.
that's the main problem here. I mean, at least if you have multiple layers and then you want to weigh multiple things, then you only have to think about the multiple layers that you will use for the weighers.
But I mean,
But also you can, another thing probably you will be able to do is combine soft anti-affinity group on AZs with hard anti-affinity on hosts.
oh, you want both? Yeah, that makes sense.
Then you like,
Yeah, true.
But
That makes a lot of sense. I think so. Before, when we were talking about, so I was saying about J Pipes and his distance idea with aggregate distance, but actually just having multiple policies on the different things with a precedence order is not a bad idea. Actually, that's much neater. And I think it's quite nice to say, because what you could do is you could say you had you could add rack in, and you could basically say make sure it's on a different AZ, but worst case it's on a different rack at least for everything else. That's hard affinity say.
John, are you thinking that we should have this kind of new policy for the server group?
Yeah, well, it's if server root policy becomes a list, right, and you can kind of
Yeah, and then you can say please honor that specific policy first,
Yeah.
and then that other one.
I'm ignoring the upcall thing that you
Yeah.
correctly pointed out. That's a pain in the ass, but yes,
Yeah.
it's cacheable though. 'cause
When you say you want to make sure that a data center can burn down and you can switch your workload, then you need to make sure also of the storage. Otherwise, your VM is not available. What we use as a workaround is that we have a 4 availability zone, which is then spawned over multiple regions or multiple available data center, and there we have also then a storage backend which is spun over the multiple availability zones, so that the storage, even if one region or one data center fails, the storage is already copied to the other side. And then of course on the other side, because it's more effort, you need to also keep more hypervisors free, because you need to make sure that you can have a whole data center or the workload of this separate data somewhere. Then of course the customer can also pay more for that feature. And everyone else who said because depending on how big your region or your availability zone is going to say it's a data center, then it's much easier if the servers on top of the VM is handling the failure domain. So if you have high availability service also, if you need to make sure of that the VM level, then it's more effort on your side, and then the customer needs to pay for it.
Yeah, I mean, the concept that we have implemented is that we leave the high availability to the customer, but we offer the functionality, which is the 3 availability zones, and you deal with that on your application level. You're running a cluster or whatever, so that you have the data available in all the availability zones, and then you of course do backups and stuff as well. So that becomes another issue here within the backup. You take the backup to the same availability zone, and you can only spin it up like a new volume based on that backup in the same availability zone. You cannot restore that into another availability zone. Dmitriy probably knows the nitty-gritty details of that, but so there are like a few bits and pieces here that
I guess there would be a way to make the backup available everywhere, but I'm not sure about that.
No, so there is no API called Rabotjagov zone to use when you restore a backup. So pretty much it will be like restoration will be handled by the same in the same availability zone where it was taken. But new volume, if you want to, like if there is no network connectivity between availability zones for storage, like this Tinder backup in AZ1 don't have access to volume in AZ2, and that's pretty much just failed.
So you know who said that in Nova? We had the same problem with Nova, right? Because when you are creating an instance that was pinned to an AZ, then basically
Yes, but you
there are
can
no
like snapshot an
possibilities to-
instance in Nova to glance, and from that you can.
That's what I was saying. I mean, with Nova, no, you're able to unshift to another AZ, which gives you an ability to move from that AZ. What I'm hearing here is that basically, unless I'm wrong, it would be nice to have a way to do a backup to another thing that's from another AZ, right?
Yes, but so I guess in our case it's a bit more simple because we have Cinder AZ matching Nova AZs.
Okay.
So it's like a bit simplified version. You don't need to care about like matching names or anything. It's like
Okay.
aligned a bit. But I agree there is a use case where it could be like, as you said, like force AZ for storage, for instance, which is completely different thing, which is just stretch across all AZs. But I really wanted, I guess, to start at least somewhere and started rolling it and thinking into the direction how we can improve things from the most pain point. As for me, even like doing just Nova part and do just ephemeral drives would be already a huge win, at least in terms of like Octavia, in terms of Truve and Kubernetes, for instance. Because in Capo you also like cannot really deal with spawning cluster across multiple AZs in a nice way. So there is either a choice to implement the same thing everywhere or just do something in Nova to support that.
That's the problem. If it really relates to starting an instance, that's why I think Nova has to be. If at the end of that you just want to start an instance, then yes, indeed, that has to be the Nova scheduler. That has to be doing something right.
Yeah.
Because if you want to attach some volume, if you want to attach some network port to that instance, and then you want to allow that, then yes, indeed, in order for Nova to schedule you an instance that expects that SLA, that necessarily has to be on the Nova scheduler base. But yeah, the problem with that approach is that that's pretty large. So I think there is. I agree with you on the fact that starting with ephemeral disks, like basic Nova instances, but honoring this kind of aggregate affinity, that will still be like a server group policy that we could implement. That could be a way of addressing that for now, because I know that there are a couple of proposals about expanding the server group policy API. You're not the only one. As far as I remember, people want to expand that to have another policy which should only be on the host. I don't feel. That looks to me like the first terrible attempt that we could be doing.
I also don't think it's like reasonable to discuss like perfect state, and I'm not sure we will be able to hide or well solve all complexity it has like ever, but we can significantly improve things and simplify for others. Because eventually if we are going with anti-affinity, then implementation in Octavia is like pretty much now, because you can just set a different policy name and that's it. Because it already can deal with groups. But now it requires quite heavy patch and spec and same you need, and also it's not really convenient to handle in Octavia, for instance, because it's doing like it spawns amphoras like in parallel in through task flow, so you don't know where it will. There is like where you can inject like code and logic is not very optimal way to do so. But yeah.
The server group affinity seems like a really good idea, right?
Yeah, I think.
So we can add it to like normal PTG if there is a space for this one.
I don't know if Rene is here, but yeah. I mean, surely just add a PTG topic and then we'll
Yeah.
try to see. I mean, we don't have the quorum yet to discuss about
Yeah, sure.
that design, but at least for me, that looks to me like the easiest way to achieve your goal, right?
Yeah. I really like it for rack affinity as well, like in the same kind of way. It's really nice.
And as I said, there are a couple of proposals already, so that's not really something new, right?
No. No. The you mentioned the Cinder thing.
Yes.
So obviously quite a lot of this does just work if we had the group affinity thing, I think.
Just to be clear, when we say the group, like the host group affinity thing or the aggregate group affinity thing.
I was thinking server group.
Yeah, there's still a server group affinity, group a group of servers, but the
Yes.
policy has to be against that.
Yeah, it'd be a host aggregate. Well, AZ or host aggregate labeled thing.
Yeah, okay. Just wanted to make sure that we talk about that. Okay.
Probably.
Yeah.
We should write down. Because you said about the inability, right, to move between the Cinder backends across the AZs. Because I guess that's one of the killer issues. Because a lot of the rest of it should kind of work in the AZ affinity stuff.
The problem is how to move VM from AZ1 to AZ2
Right.
because storage, well, in our use case at least, we have isolated completely storages,
Yeah.
which kind of makes sense at some distance.
It makes sense. I thought we used to have a solution for this because there used to be the case for, and this is going back a bit, it was more like, it was a way to model the, what is it called? The special storage with the cables at the bottom of the rack thing.
Probably you can do
Fiber
through
channel.
retyping.
Because originally it was added for fiber channels, so that you could have like your fiber channel Cinder AZ being your rack, and then the Nova ones were all matching. And I can't remember if those folks came up with a solution to move it between the AZs. Because I wanted to
So
say,
if you
oh,
have
do
a
a
network
snapshot.
connection in
Well, these ones
both
are,
their volumes,
these
that
ones
is not a
are
problem.
working. Yes, these are actually interestingly a similar problem because there was no fiber channel connectivity between the racks, right? It was just an in-rack connection. So I have a feeling it was something like Snapshot. Maybe they did a backup, but their backup was all of the individual AZs had like a common S3 backend.
It doesn't really help because you cannot restore the backup through Cinder volume.
So the restore doesn't work.
So yes, you can do to the same S3 storage. This is what we are trying to do now.
Okay.
And we are also doing like trying to push a change to Cinder actually. There is actually a blueprint from 2018 or something to implement the API. So now the restoration process is handled by the same AZ where backup was created.
Oh, so if it's dead, then you're screwed. Right.
It's the first thing, and the second thing, it doesn't have access to the second AZ.
Yeah.
So, like, ideally, you need to provide an API call which AZ should be handling restoration process or something like that, some way to override it.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Now I see what your problem is. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
And really, probably the only way to really like do it right now is through glance.
Yeah, I think that might be the way that they did for the fiber channel.
But it's like, I mean,
It takes forever, right? Yes.
and it's also nasty.
Yeah.
Because if you have a backup, you assume that you can like, if like there is a fire in the building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering how people normally configure Cinder backup.
And if they do at all.
Honestly, I usually turn it off because it confuses people. They think that they're backing it up and it's not really doing anything for them because it's the same damn set for both. So, like, what are you doing? Yeah, I don't know. Like, if all three AZs had the same Cinder backup somehow, maybe we need to tell Cinder that ignore AZ for backup because it's actually agnostic or something. But I'm making assumptions that you probably don't have
Probably
your
can do
architecture.
that, but I mean, you still would need connection because if it will be random, it's in the backup, then it needs to be connected to all like storages in network.
I mean, I was thinking if you had a
And probably you
A
can use
global-
because you don't care about speed or latency much.
yeah.
in this
Because I
case.
was thinking if say, well, let's just say for example it was a global Ceph between the 3 regions for your backup system. You could do the whole, DNS cheating malarkey that you always talk to your local S3, but they can all see all the OSDs. I'm making a wild set of assumptions here.
Yeah,
right?
you probably can do that, like. But,
Yeah. But I have just re-architected.
this is something I would suggest to do, like for masses at least.
Yeah, but I guess even if you went down all of that, right, it wouldn't work for the reason that you're saying because it's like locked to the AZ. But you could try and, I think there's maybe a case to be made for backup to not be specific to the AZ. So that the creation of the backup is always in the AZ it should be, but creating a new volume from a backup should be AZ independent.
So
potentially.
there was a reason in this pack why it was abandoned, that this approach doesn't work. I don't remember specifically, but it was written somewhere in Garrett.
Okay.
So it was a bit more complex, and the person just kind of abandoned the idea as a whole.
Yeah, it's just hard, isn't
Yeah.
it?
But also, I guess, if we are like, I don't know, do we have time still?
No, I was just looking. Yeah, I think we have at least 4 minutes.
Yeah, so I guess another thing was like, it's probably personally I don't get, so we probably would also want to have an input on is kinda glance in cross-AZ setup, because eventually what you can do with glance is you can use interoperable import to sync between different storages. But my problem understanding this approach is nothing actually using import, and you cannot enforce like people to use import. And if you like use Horizon, if you use Skyline, if you use Nova, it will just go through a upload process, and your image won't end up in like all these locations. So I kind of fail to understand how people are using like Glance right now, except of like S3 storage. Which is like outside somewhere, and then it takes forever to pull in like 200 gigabytes image.
Yeah.
So if I'm missing something in there, it would be good. If not, potentially we need to look into implementing like import more widely in services.
I guess
It
it
used to
depends
be.
on.
Oh, sorry.
I guess it depends on how you define or scope your AZ. Right? So if it's like a rack or in the same building but different areas in the building, then you can have one glance storage. Or if you have different data centers but fast connections between them, then you still can have one glance. And maybe you have something that you have I'm not sure how it's described, but that you have in, for example, in Ceph or so, in your Cinder, a copy of the image that you then can load, that it's even faster, that you don't need to get the image all the time from glance directly.
Yeah, but it will be like in Cinder in one AZ, unless storage is shared, right, between.
Yeah, exactly. Or
But if you have like three AZs, 3 isolated storages, and like one glance, because you don't want to upload the image like 3 times.
yeah, or you have a high available storage for your glance, like
Yeah, like
available
S3, I
also,
guess.
yeah, exactly.
But then you cannot really benefit from copy and write or things like that, I guess.
Yeah, it depends
Because-
on the solution you use then. For Cinder, I'm not sure if Ceph still can do that. If you have downloaded the image once, then sees okay. It's
Yeah, you can cache it, yes.
yeah, yeah, exactly, an image cache, something like
Yeah.
that.
The only thing that came to mind when you were mentioning this is there used to be a whole load of hooks put into Glance for on-image upload, do some stuff. I haven't
This
used
is import, I believe.
Yeah, that's the one. Maybe it's a different API, maybe that's the issue.
It's different API, yes,
Yeah.
it's different API call, so it's a different path.
Because what, I mean this is ancient history now, back when I was at Rackspace, what that was, they originally tried to do was when you upload the image, it was a tarred QCal, So they wanted to validate that the tile wasn't like a tile. So
Yeah.
that was used for that import thing, but potentially that kind of flow could be what you could do, sort of like send it to all the backends.
Yeah, exactly. And it can do this. It has the support of it.
Ah, okay.
So if you upload image through import, you can configure it to like spread across like storages.
Right.
But the problem is that the first thing, I don't know how it works in terms of like you need to use this API if nothing use it.
Yeah, that's the issue.
And the second issue, when you try to pull the image and only one, so from Nova perspective or from Nova Compute or like from Cinder perspective, only one storage actually available. What is going to do, like how it's gonna pick the new one, because there is nothing like availability, like it's just three storages, they are treated equally.
Yeah. I think we are out of time.
Yes.
You're up next.
Yes.
Maybe I can
Sorry
share
to interrupt.
for plans. In details, in the past, I set up with 3 AZ with a safe backend. We use Blanc stuff to put the images on the 3 AZ.
But you're using import API or just a regular one? Because there is like image upload and image import APIs.
Thanks a lot for
Import. So, and you are not using Horizon API. Oh, wait, okay. Okay, so you can teach this.
We're a team.
And so, for example, when you try to make